Question 1. I tried to use some sort of elements from Vibe magazine as an inspiration to my actual front cover. From the Vibe magazine, I noticed that the masthead was big and eye-catching so that it grabs the reader's attention, so we decided as a group that our house style on the mastheads were going to be as we thought it was very effective. The main image on the Vibe magazine was a long shot of Usher, so I tried the same. I took a photo of my model as a relatively long shot. However, my magazine looks straight at the camera, which denotes that he is looking straight at the audience and is grabbing them towards the magazine. In my magazine, the one thing I found common is that the cover lines were also big and bold, and there was also a quote given by the person as that was in the main image. As these are some of the conventions I found in real magazines, I did the same and used big and bold cover lines, different to everyone else, which makes it original. Also added a pull quote so that it grabs the reader's attention. On the Vibe magazine, there was a skyline of the various other artists that were going to appear in the magazine. I found this very effective and did the same. I also found that the Vibe magazine had a 3-color scheme, so I also made a 3-color scheme of blue, black and red. I tried to use some of the elements that were used in Vibe magazine contents page. As you can see in the Vibe magazine of Usher, the main image of him is a long shot with a very strong and bold pose. I tried making my main image similar to this style and used it in my contents page. The style in which the features and page numbers has been given in the Vibe magazine is relatively similar to mine. I thought this made the contents page very attractive because it was simple and stylish. It was easy for the audience to understand where and what was going on in the magazine. Lastly, the layout of the DPS in the Vibe magazine was very effective. With a main image of Usher on one side and the interview on the other, I used a similar style. I used my model on one page and the interview of my model on the other. I found that the interviews was really long and were put into columns in Vibe magazine. However, my interview was a full page with no columns. I tried to be unique by highlighting certain words and putting certain text like Trisha the interviewer and General the interviewee in different colors so that it made it easier for the audience to understand who was speaking. The main image on the opposite side to the interview had a quote on the Vibe magazine. I wanted to be different, so instead I used a pull quote on my main image and made a title up which relates to the interview, which was called General Talking the Hardest. I made this stand out by adding effects to it, which is also another unique element. Question 7. Looking back at your preliminary task, what do you feel you have learned in the progression from it to the full product? You can see a big difference from my preliminary task to my final music magazine in terms of what goes in a magazine and the sort of layer of what a magazine should be like. One of the things I have learned is that the front page in a magazine should not be overloaded with too much text, but should always have the important bits as to what the magazine will offer to get readers interested. The main image should always be big and eye-catching. In my preliminary task, the main image is not as big as it could have been. Now that I look back at it, I realize that I could have made it much more professional. Whereas in my final music magazine, the model in my main image is looking straight at the audience and is big and eye-catching, and looks relatively professional. The house style in a magazine should always be the same to the other issues it has or makes. This was also another thing that I learned. The house style consists of the masthead, barcode, issue number, date and the price tag as well. Another thing that I've learned is that my cover line should be short and sweet for the readers. It shouldn't be too long as it might be unprofessional and might give too much detail to the readers. The placing of the cover lines on my preliminary task could have been better and together. The whole page looks a bit cramped. The preliminary task compared to my final music magazine looks a bit weak and unprofessional, and these could be a few reasons why. Regarding the contents page, I learned that the person on your front page as your main image should also be on your contents page. I found this familiar with other magazines as well. Like the magazine from Vibe of Usher, he was on the main image of the front page of the magazine, contents page and even the DPS. I did this in my music magazine as well. However, I did not use this in my preliminary task. The other thing that I learned was that the editor's page and the features or regulars should be on two different sites. Although it isn't a must, I found this very common in most magazines I searched through. The editor's letter is always a different font style to the rest of the texts on the contents page. Regarding the softwares, Photoshop and InDesign, I found that I have improved more on Photoshop than I have on InDesign. At first I did my front page, contents page and DPS all on Photoshop. Not aware that I had to do my contents page and DPS on InDesign, the teacher later on informed me that I had to rectify my mistake by dragging them into InDesign. However, dragging images on InDesign was fine, but dragging the text was an issue because the words would get muddled up and you couldn't fix them up once it's on InDesign. So I learned that when making a contents page and DPS to always do it on InDesign. I later on found out as to why I had to convert them into InDesign. One of the reasons was that it was easier to place things and keep the pages organized. Lastly, regarding Photoshop, I learned that everything on the page has a layer and you could edit texts and images by putting in effects. I found this useful as it is apparent that most of my texts have an effect to them. I am now more confident on cropping out images on Photoshop. As you can see from my preliminary tasks,
Question 1. In what ways do your media product use, develop or challenge forms of conventions of real media products? For my front cover of my magazine, I've developed conventional magazines by following the same sort of cover as Vibe or Q magazine, but I've added my own more powerful colour scheme to them. Like for my main front cover, the final one, the colour scheme was black, gold and red, which I believe makes it more of my own magazine rather than copying other magazines like Vibe. I followed the same kind of rules as Vibe though, by using a gradient background to fade from gold to black. I've also used a similar sort of text style to Vibe, but as is the front cover, you can only really change so much as a style to your text. I've not put the name of the artist on my front cover because I believe that if the artist is very recognizable, then you won't need to know their name to see, oh, I know that person. So for regular readers, they'll just buy the magazine because it's the magazine, whereas new readers may buy it simply because they recognize the artist on the front cover. For the contents page of my magazine, it's more of a mix between Q, Vibe and maybe Kerrang magazine, because it's got its own sort of organized style to it, but it still looks kind of free-flowing. So the contents page's text is written as if I was talking to the reader. You can see this in the editor's letter and in the way I've described the main features. I've used a less conventional method of laying out my contents page because I have bits that overlap I have pictures that overlap each other. I've done this simply because it makes it more visually interesting. I've also used a range of shots for my contents page, such as mid shots and wide angle shots. That way it is still visually interesting to readers that may just skip the contents page and read the whole of the magazine. Hopefully the range of photos used and the visual effects that I've added will keep the reader on the contents page to see what they're about to read rather than skipping ahead. Finally, for the double page spread, I've used a very simple layout of columns and gutters for my question and answer. I've added a few little elements such as straight lines and an outer glow on the pull-out quote. That way it looks interesting as well as reads well. The colour scheme for my double page spread is black, red and white, but it's very bold as black is the background colour and red is the main body of the text. The reason why I've done that is because the name of the artist is red, so I thought it would be clever by having his answers in red as well as his name being red. And then the questions are written in white with italics, that way the reader can really differentiate